Publish or jobless? That sounds like an ultimatum. It is actually a description of two very different economic positions. Picture a senior strategist watching her employer adopt AI. Yesterday, a campaign needed her judgment plus a writer, a researcher, a designer, and an analyst. Today, one person with a model can produce a rough version of all five people's work. The obvious picture puts the machine on the other side of the desk. Human here, competitor there. One of them wins, and one becomes unnecessary. But turn the desk around. The machine that can replace part of her work can also perform that work for her. The cost structure that weakens her job may let her build something she could never afford to build before. Hi, I am Leo. Welcome to Wiki for What? This is where we unpack the mind, machines, and hidden systems shaping the AI era through stories and models you can actually use. I recently wrote a book called Publish or Jobless. I do not want to give you a teaser for it. I want to give you its best idea, its operating model, and its warning label. The best idea is simple. AI is not only a job destroyer, it is a break-even destroyer. Break-even is the point where the money coming into an activity finally covers the cost of keeping it alive. For a traditional company, that bar can be high. A useful new product may require salaries for engineering, design, sales, support, management, and operations before the first dollar of profit appears. A small market can contain real customers with a real pain and still be economically invisible to that company. The market is not worthless. It is merely too small for the company's cost structure. AI can reduce the time required for some writing and support tasks. It may do the same for parts of research, coding, design, and analysis. Controlled studies do not show magic, and their results should not be generalized carelessly, but they do show the direction. In one experiment, professionals using a general-purpose AI assistant completed writing tasks substantially faster, while independent evaluators rated the results more highly. In a field study involving more than 5,000 customer support agents, AI assistants increased issues resolved per hour on average, with the largest gains among less experienced workers. The important point is not one percentage. It is what happens when the cost of producing a useful first version falls. The minimum viable size of a business falls with it. Imagine an old mining company with a machine so large that it can pick up only giant blocks of ore. The ground around it is scattered with smaller pieces. The company ignores them because bending down would cost more than the ore is worth. Then one person arrives with a small cart and a team of cheap mechanical arms. Those neglected pieces are suddenly worth collecting. The giant machine is the traditional firm. The mechanical arms are AI labor. The small pieces are narrow markets, too small to support a department, but potentially large enough to matter deeply to one person. This is not an argument that everyone should quit a job. A job can be excellent leverage. It supplies income, credibility, domain exposure, and a daily view of problems outsiders cannot see. The mistake is confusing that leverage with something you own. Your title, team, budget, employer's brand, and company login can all disappear in one afternoon. What remains? Usually what remains is judgment, the recurring problem you know how to recognize, the standard you know how to enforce, and the taste that tells you which plausible answer is actually good. But private judgment is difficult for a market to see. It has to be turned into an asset. That is what publish means here. Publishing is turning an idea, judgment, process, taste, dataset, workflow, story, or tool into a public asset that a stranger can discover, evaluate, use, buy, share, or cite. Notice that publishing does not mean posting constantly or becoming famous. A small browser tool can be published. So can a short field guide, a template, a carefully maintained directory, or a workflow that removes one repetitive task for one kind of business. The test is not whether you pressed an upload button. The test is whether the thing can keep meeting strangers without you standing beside it to explain why it matters. Now we can replace the competitor picture with a better one. Imagine the strategist walking into a workshop. Along one wall are small machines. One turns customer interviews into a structured research brief. Another builds a rough prototype. Another tests the links and catches broken steps. Another drafts support replies. Each machine is fast and cheap to run, but not reliably right. None can reliably decide which customer deserves attention. None can reliably tell when an answer is legally risky, factually wrong, ugly, or simply not useful. The strategist is not competing with these machines. She is directing them. Her job has changed from producing every part to choosing what should exist, defining the standard, checking the result, and accepting responsibility when it ships. AI supplies labor. The human supplies judgment. At the far end of the workshop sits one finished machine facing the street. It does one narrow job for one narrow market. Perhaps it turns a painful handoff process from her old industry into a checklist and tool. Perhaps it automates a recurring report that small agencies hate preparing. A stranger can find it, understand it, and use it without hiring her first. That is an owned asset. The distinction matters because a conventional job usually has one employer buying that slice of your labor. An owned asset can invite many buyers to inspect the same piece of judgment. You do not need fame. You need legibility. A market must be able to see what you solve. The opposite of legibility is economic invisibility. You can be highly paid, fully employed, and still be economically invisible outside one institution. Your colleagues know you rescue difficult projects. Your manager knows you can spot a bad assumption in 10 minutes. But a stranger cannot discover that ability, evaluate it, or buy a piece of it without first offering you a job. All of your value is trapped inside one relationship. An asset opens a small window in that wall. It takes one repeatable slice of private capability and gives it a public shape. The goal is not to compress your whole career into a product. It is to let one useful piece travel without you. That is the move from one buyer of labor toward many possible buyers of judgment. But the workshop has a dangerous setting. If the machines can produce one asset cheaply, they can produce 1,000. That temptation creates the worst strategy in the AI era, flooding the market with plausible-looking material that nobody verified and nobody truly decided should exist. Call that slop. Slop is not merely content made by a machine. It is machine output published without human responsibility. One experiment on generative AI and creativity captures the risk neatly. Giving writers AI-generated ideas for short stories improved average ratings while making the resulting stories more similar to one another. In settings like this, shared machinery without strong judgment can expand supply and pull it toward the same safe center. So cheap production is not a moat. It is available to your competitors too. The book's bet is that as supply becomes abundant, value moves toward what remains scarce: specificity, verification, taste, trust, and a real human decision. Before the strategist lets anything leave her workshop, she needs a gate. Can a real person use it end to end? Are its claims verified? Is it meaningfully better than the free answer a customer could generate alone? Does it contain a decision born from actual experience? Would she put her real name on it? If the answer is no, the machine has produced raw material, not an asset. Then comes the coldest part of the model. The street outside the workshop is a market, not a supportive meeting. Compliments are warm signals. A return visit is colder. An email sign-up costs a little trust. A purchase costs money. Costlier signals usually carry stronger evidence of intent. This is why the first goal is not a grand company. It is one small, complete, market-facing thing. Choose a problem narrower than feels impressive. Build the smallest asset that solves it once. Put it where people already look for the answer. Then watch what strangers actually do. Give that first loop a short deadline, because open-ended ambition is where assets go to hide. Spend the early days confirming the pain and studying how people handle it now. Define the smallest useful version before asking AI to build anything. Let the machine draft, code, compare alternatives, and test obvious paths. Then slow down. Use the asset as the customer would. Verify every claim. Remove anything generic. Write a clear page that says who it is for, what it does, and how a stranger can try or buy it. Finally, ship before the project can grow into a private monument. The first asset does not need to replace a salary. Its first job is to produce evidence. Can you complete the loop from judgment, through machine labor, through a quality gate, into a real market? One paid order is useful evidence, but even a clean failure teaches you more than another month of planning, because now the market has touched the machine. If nobody arrives, the distribution failed and the asset was never tested. If people arrive and leave, the promise or fit may be wrong. If they use it but will not pay, the offer may be weak. None of these signals is a verdict on your worth. Each is a diagnostic on one machine. If one machine works, do not immediately build an empire around it. Build a second small machine whose failure mode is different. A search-driven tool and a directly sold guide do not rely on exactly the same channel. A recurring workflow for a business fails differently from a marketplace template. Over time, the aim is a portfolio of tiny machines, not one heroic bet. The human now operates at a higher level. AI runs much of the research, drafting, building, packaging, and reporting. The human decides which experiments enter the workshop, which outputs clear the quality gate, which machine receives more attention, and which weak machine gets switched off. That last decision is essential. A portfolio is not a warehouse full of abandoned projects. Every new asset should begin with a pre-written test. What signal would justify more investment? By what date? And what happens if the signal never arrives? Decide the exit while you are calm. Otherwise, sunk cost will turn every failed experiment into a permanent dependent. This is where the workshop metaphor reaches its boundary. These assets are not passive metal boxes. They need maintenance, distribution, customer trust, and ongoing judgment. Many still sit on rented ground. A search engine, a marketplace, a payment provider, or a platform can change its rules. A portfolio reduces dependence. It does not abolish it, and AI does not guarantee demand. It can make many experiments cheaper to run. The deeper shift is not from employee to entrepreneur. It is from renting all your judgment to one buyer toward making some of that judgment visible and useful to many. You can do that while employed. In fact, your current work may be the best map of small pains that large organizations will never solve. So ask yourself one practical question. What repeated problem have you learned to see that your employer considers too small, too awkward, or too boring to fix? That may be your first piece of ore. Do not begin by building a company around it. Build one small machine. Let AI perform the labor, keep judgment at the gate, ship the asset, and allow the cold market to answer. If you could make one piece of your current judgment visible to strangers, what would you publish first? Pick one idea from this episode and keep exploring it. The next useful tool, book, or decision will make more sense now. I am Leo. See you in the next one.